That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, so we're going to continue to look at where these rookies stack up in our overall Dynasty startup rankings. And here we are going to dive over to the position that I know everybody wants to talk about. Actually, you know what? Maybe that's not true. Maybe for this rookie class, everyone wants wide receivers. But nonetheless, we're going to be talking running backs here. And I'm excited to do so, to say the least. But of course, before we get into it, you know what I'm going to say. And if you have not done so already, it does truly hurt. I don't know what else I got to do, but drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and also, as we go through this video right now, don't do it, but as we go through, please, if I say anything wrong or you see any rankings that you disagree with, let me know in the comment section, but let me know why. Don't just go down there and say, Mason, you idiot, Breece Hall needs to be ranked higher than this. You have no idea what you were talking about, yada, yada, yada. While all that stuff may be true, I need to hear your explanation why behind it. I need to hear why I truly am so stupid so I cannot be as stupid tomorrow. But that should be it. Let's go through. Let's dive into these running backs. And let's start it off with our running back one currently in this draft class. I know a lot of people have gone through and a lot of people have been talking about, is he overrated? Is he underrated? Yada, yada, yada. And I honestly think they're probably looking at the wrong boxes, but this is going to be Isiah Spiller. Okay, so you know that while everybody else likes to focus in on running back production, and let me pull this up just for some shits and giggles here so I can go, oh my God, look, Isiah Spiller did this at 19 years old at Alabama. Oh, Isiah Spiller had over 1,000 rushing yards at Alabama. He had over 200 receiving yards at 18 years old. Well, I mean, I know some people want to look at that compared to his teammates. What I care about is I care about a couple boxes. I care about the NFL draft capital leading to opportunity for these running backs. That's going to be probably the most important thing that we are going to see. Historically speaking, it definitely is. I also care about the speed we are going to see these running backs have at the NFL Combine, because historically speaking, that has mattered, as well as the size for them to be able to become 3-down running backs at the next level. And I don't need to see you be Ezekiel Elliott. You don't need to be Derrick Henry. You don't need to even be Dalvin Cook, but you need to at least have a BMI of 30.0. That's why I really like DeAndre Swift back in 2020. I mean, a lot of people did not like DeAndre Swift because he was too small, but he wasn't too small all along. Yeah, he was a little short, and if you looked at his weight, it wasn't fantastic, but he was that stocky running back. He had that build you were looking for. And also, of course, we need to see that receiving game upside so you can be on the field on third downs. And those are going to be the main things that we are looking for. I don't want to be diving into their actual production. I don't want to be sitting here trying to talk about what running back is inherently better between the tackles than the other. Like, I feel like we're wasting our time doing that. That's not what matters. That's not what really translates to fantasy production. While it is important for those running backs to get opportunity on the field, I think a lot more actually goes into it. And here, if we are looking at where I'm going to be ranking Isiah Spiller, I had a hard time doing so because we're used to our running back one in a draft class going up there and automatically being a top 10 dynasty running back. You're used to 2018 Saquon Barkley stepping into the NFL and being a top 3 dynasty running back for everybody. You're used to even in 2019 Josh Jacobs getting into that borderline top 12 range. In 2020, Jonathan Taylor, Clyde Edwards-Helaire automatically, first round startup picks. In 2021, I mean, obviously you had not the same class as 2020, but still, someone like Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, they get that first round NFL draft capital. They check a lot of boxes and they become borderline running back ones in Dynasty right away. I don't know if we can say that with this draft class here, because with Isiah Spiller, there are going to be a couple boxes that I really like to see. The number one reason that I am currently going to actually have him as our running back one is because that receiving upside that we previously discussed. I mean, if you're looking at what he did at 18 years old, for Texas A&M, 18 years old, 203 receiving yards. I'm very impressed by that because obviously you want your player to be able to come out of the NFL at a young age. You need them to be able to come out of the NFL after 3 years and 3 years only, which Isiah Spiller did. He's only 20 years old. And to go along with this, you want them to be able to get on the field and produce early. It's not as important at running back as it is at wide receiver, but still it's important. And with Isiah Spiller, I have no questions about his receiving game upside. 29 receptions his first season there at Texas A&M, and every year very consistent, averaging at least 2 receptions a game. Of course, we would like to see it eventually be a little bit higher than what it capped out to be, but I don't see a lot of questions with this profile. The receiving upside looks like it's there. The athletic profile looks like it's not going to be Saquon Barkley, but at the same time, it's not going to be Sony Michel. It'll be a nice, happy medium. He will be able to go out there and hit the minimum threshold that we have for his 40-yard dash. And right now, if we're going over, looking at grinding the mocks, I know that, of course, this is not a perfect science. I mean, we can safely say that. But still, as of now, I mean, you actually have Isiah Spiller projected to be the #1 running back off the board. Now, this is different than what it was previously. A lot of people previously thought it was going to be Kenneth Walker, and these are going to be 2 guys that are going neck and neck in mock drafts pretty much until we get to the NFL Combine, and probably then you're going to give the slight edge to Walker just because the athletic profile that he has. But nonetheless, Isiah Spiller looks like he is in the argument to be made the running back 1 in the NFL draft as it currently stands, and he looks like he is going to be going late in the 2nd round. So with all these boxes being checked, I have no question that Isiah Spiller is going to be a running back that we can start in Dynasty as early as his rookie season. The issue, on the other hand, is the upside that you're going to find with Isiah Spiller. I think that this could be very similar to a scenario that maybe you saw with Miles Sanders in his NFL career outside of every instance but the very end of his rookie season when he was a league-winning player. But outside of that, I mean, you see a consistent mid-running back 2 that's never able to fully dominate touches in his own backfield, but does have a high floor. You look at his age, you look at the overall profile. I don't have too many questions. So I'm going to personally be ranking him at running back 17. I have him right ahead of guys like David Montgomery and Josh Jacobs, because if we're comparing him to David Montgomery and Josh Jacobs, give me Isiah Spiller as they are running backs that, in my opinion, have similar floors, but you're just resetting that pick with Isiah Spiller. You're going, you know what? I mean, David Montgomery drafted in 2019. We've gotten 3 years out of him. If we can just kind of rewind time, if we can go back a little bit and get those 3 extra years out of Isiah Spiller, might as well do so. Now, of course, we're going to have to wait until we get landing spots, but I'm feeling comfortable putting him ahead of David Montgomery and Josh Jacobs because it's not like they're in fantastic situations either. Now, I have him directly behind Travis Etienne and Derrick Henry. With Derrick Henry, of course, this is pretty much the exact opposite of what you have with Isiah Spiller, and it will come down to where you're currently building with your dynasty team, if you're going to be a contending roster, if you're going to be rebuilding one. But with Isiah Spiller, this is a running back that I perceive not really to have that top 5 upside. I'd be very surprised if Isiah Spiller became ever a top 5 running back in the NFL, but he does have that high floor over the next 4 years. Whereas Derrick Henry, 28 years old, we can say Derrick Henry has top 5 running back upside this upcoming season, but the floor with Derrick Henry is going to be very low after this year. I want to say you could see the fall off very quickly. You could see the fall off with Derrick Henry at any point now, as he is 28 years old. And historically speaking, those running backs don't last to be elite producers at 29 or 30. So I think it's a fair mark to have these running backs neck and neck because you get pros and cons with each running back. I'm going to have him 2 spots behind Travis Etienne, however, because with Etienne, I mean, he is going to have that 5th-year option in Jacksonville. So if you're looking at the rookie contract, I mean, essentially Isiah Spiller, who's not going in the 1st round, will be a 2nd-round pick, is going to have the same amount of time left on his own rookie deal, and they're going to be in line to get a 2nd contract together in 3 seasons. And the difference between these two is I believe that with Travis Etienne, the college profile is a little bit better as a pass-catching running back out of the backfield. And to go along with this, I mean, we kind of know that Travis Etienne is going to be able to dominate touches in his backfield, as we've seen that James Robinson, with that significant injury, probably won't be coming back until late next year. So I think that Isiah Spiller is going to be a fair running back to have at 17. It's just hard because usually we have these rookies a lot higher than this. It's obviously up to the class, though. Now, going over to our next running back with Breece Hall, in my opinion, he is neck and neck with Isiah Spiller at this point. I mean, if you're going over and you're pulling up our rookie rankings on Patreon, we have Isiah Spiller at the 107. We have Breece Hall at the 108. I know we're going to have them lower than most people at this point. I just don't see the upside with Breece Hall either to ever really become that top 5 running back in Dynasty. I would prefer the elite level wide receivers like Treylon Burks, Garrett Wilson, Drake London that I'm comfortable with regardless of their landing spots, as well as those quarterbacks like Malik Willis, Matt Corral, and Kenny Pickett that should go within the top 20 picks of the NFL draft. And if they have success year one, you should be able to see their Dynasty Superflex price just skyrocket. And with Isiah Spiller and Breece Hall, I want to put a massive asterisk out here because when we get to the NFL Combine and we get the official size and athletic testing for both running backs, which you know I don't really care about for a position like wide receiver, but at running back, it matters a ton. We are going to get an update where these running backs definitely can move one way or another. And I mean, we're going to get another massive update when we get their landing spots and their actual team investment in the NFL draft as well. But as it stands, I'm going to have Breece Hall at running back 18 right next to Isiah Spiller because, I mean, everything that we said about Spiller, I think, remains true for Breece Hall. He's going to be right there with the thresholds for his BMI, for his speed, for his team investment. And, I mean, he was a decent pass catcher at Iowa State. I mean, I know that it doesn't look like that's his strength, but, I mean, if we pull this up right now, he's, I don't want to say better than what you had with Isiah Spiller, but he at least has an argument to be made right there to be a player that's going to be able to get consistent work as a receiving running back out of the backfield. Whereas, I mean, he goes out there and averages 3 receptions a game his final season at Iowa State compared to where Isiah Spiller was only at 2. Keep in mind, Breece Hall was the dominant workhorse running back for his own offense. And as we go through this, if we see Breece Hall and Isiah Spiller have a similar mark in terms of their athletic profile, I am most likely going to move Breece Hall ahead of Isiah Spiller by 1 spot. But for now, I just don't see a reason to really argue these guys tooth and nail unless you have your rookie draft right now. Then you can focus in on it. But I think for people to be arguing, oh, do you want Breece Hall? Do you want Isiah Spiller? I mean, who are you taking between these two? I think if anything, it's a little bit of just a wasted conversation at this point when there's so much data that we still need to collect, because right now I'm viewing these running backs as very similar players, guys that should go in the top 2 rounds of the NFL draft that can be borderline 3-down running backs that probably have a lower ceiling than a top 5 option, but at the same time have a high floor over the next 4 years. So we're going to have them right ahead of David Montgomery and Josh Jacobs because I'm viewing them as pretty much the same level player, but you're just hitting that reset button. And now let's go over to our next guy, and this is going to be someone that's projected to go ahead of Breece Hall in the NFL draft. But, I mean, even though I am a draft capital snob, I'm going to have him behind him in our Dynasty rankings, and this is Kenneth Walker. I'm expecting Kenneth Walker to be a fantastic athlete at the Combine. I'm expecting him to get that NFL draft capital, and I'm actually expecting him probably to be a running back that works his way higher up Dynasty draft boards by the time we get to rookie drafts. However, I'm going to have him, 5 spots lower than Isiah Spiller. 6 spots lower than Breece Hall. I probably did that math incorrect. We have him 7 spots lower than Isiah Spiller. We have him at running back 24. I have him in the same tier as Michael Carter, A.J. Dillon, and Elijah Mitchell. And we have him right next to Elijah Mitchell, because I think they're almost very similar players at this point. They look like they are running backs that can handle every single touch on first and second down. Now, Kenneth Walker is going to get more invested into him by his NFL team than Elijah Mitchell currently has. But Elijah Mitchell has proven year one that he should be a part of the 49ers plans going forward. I am just hesitant with Walker in particular because, if you look at what he did as a receiving running back, now I know obviously He transferred. I mean, maybe they weren't able to work him into this offense exactly as they wanted to, but still, he just simply did not really get the involvement in the receiving game that we saw from these other running backs. He barely averaged 1 reception a game, and I know target share for these running backs is going to be a lot more important, which is why we should probably move Breece Hall ahead of Isiah Spiller, despite Isiah Spiller having more competition for touches in his own backfield. But that's all besides the point. At Michigan State, Kenneth Walker only had 13 receptions through 12 games. He did not eclipse 100 receiving yards. So with the lack of involvement as a receiving running back, I'm going to have him next to a few of those same players, like A.J. Dillon, for example. I don't necessarily see why we would have Kenneth Walker ahead of A.J. Dillon if A.J. Dillon is still very young, was drafted in 2020. And to go along with this, A.J. Dillon's a running back that we have seen be a fantastic option on first and second down in the NFL. I would say that A.J. Dillon's most likely a more talented running back than Kenneth Walker. However, we need to have them in the same tier because with Kenneth Walker, you're getting that reset in his age. You are getting a younger player that's going to be able to just kind of, I don't want to say replicate the first 2 years of A.J. Dillon's career because, of course, A.J. Dillon was in a little bit of a unique situation. I'd imagine Kenneth Walker probably finds himself a better landing spot. I think it's fair to have him. We have him directly ahead of Zeke, Aaron Jones, and Leonard Fournette, who are clearly very low in our dynasty rankings, but I'm just not a massive fan of those veteran RBs. And now going over to our next option, this is someone that we recently moved up our dynasty running back rankings, but he's pretty damn low. I think after those top 3 running backs with Isiah Spiller, Kenneth Walker, and Breece Hall, you're going to have a significant fall off. And this running back here is going to be Brian Robinson. And with Robinson, of course, I mean, he gets the Alabama bump. This is probably the hardest team to evaluate these running backs coming out of because you have guys like Josh Jacobs that really don't produce at all that end up going in the first round based on what people see on film because they've just split a backfield with players like Damian and Najee Harris. I mean, this team is dominant. Now, what's interesting with Brian Robinson is if you see that you have a running back coming out after 5 years in college, that is automatically a massive red flag. If a player had to stay 5 years in school, you know that there's something wrong with this profile. Now, very similar to what we talked about with Devonta Smith in the excuses we made for him staying 4 years at Alabama last offseason, we have to look at the context that he stayed at Alabama and why he was not able to get on the field early. Like, he gets there as a true freshman. Don't ask me why you would ever decide to go to Alabama if this is the depth chart. But he gets there, and you have Damian Harris, Bo Scarborough, Najee Harris, and Josh Jacobs all on the roster that season. They all lead him in rushing yards. So that's just a complete wasted year because if you're 18 years old and I go out there and I tell you, hey, let's go, let's jump Damian Harris, Najee Harris, and Josh Jacobs on the depth chart. What are you going to look back and tell me? Obviously, this is just a different situation. And then it's the same story in 2018. I mean, if you're looking at this, Damian Harris, 876 rushing yards. I mean, Najee Harris, 783. Joshua Jacobs, 640. 2019. I mean, here it starts to clear up a little bit, but this is when you get that breakout for Najee Harris. I mean, you get Najee Harris with 1,200 rushing yards, Brian Robinson with 400 in 2020. Obviously, this is the dominant year from Najee Harris, over 1,400 rushing yards. Brian Robinson, yet again, a backup. So he finally gets rid of the combination of Damian Harris, Najee Harris, and Josh Jacobs, and we get to see him play in 2021. And in 2021, he puts up a fantastic season, similar to what you saw with Najee Harris the year prior. He comes out, has over 1,300 rushing yards, averages almost 100 rushing yards a game. And to go along with this is a player that has essentially 300 receiving yards as well out of the backfield and 35 receptions. I mean, averaging almost 2.5 receptions per game. Looked fantastic in the playoffs as well. So with Brian Robinson, it's hard because he's 23 years old when he's doing this. And think about it, a 23-year-old man going up against an 18-year-old kid. That is simply not fair, and it's hard to take a lot away from it. And it's hard to separate Brian Robinson from one of the best offensive lines in college football. And to go along with this, one of the best quarterbacks in college football. So there's so much to look at here. I am probably just going to lean on the side saying, hell, he looks like he's going to be big enough to be a 3-down guy if he gets the opportunity. He most likely is not going to be drafted to be a starter for his own team, but he will have the receiving capability that if he does get vaulted up into a starting role, they don't have to take him off the field on 3rd downs. So I would almost view him as a poor man's Alexander Mattison. Pretty much just you're praying that he finds himself in a primary handcuff type situation where if the starter goes down in front of him, say he gets drafted to the Cincinnati Bengals and they move on from Samaje Perine, they decide to use Joe Mixon as that 3-down player and Joe Mixon goes down, then you say, hell, Brian Robinson, maybe he's that poor man's version of Alexander Mattison. He's not going to be a top 3 running back like Mattison, but he can be that top 12 guy. So for those reasons, we are going to have him ranked behind guys like James Robinson, Alexander Mattison, Ramondre Stevenson in that premium handcuff running back tier. And my God, I just realized we actually missed out on 2 guys 4 spots ahead of that in our rankings in Kyren Williams and James Cook. I apologize for being this stupid. These are both players that are projected to actually go behind Brian Robinson in the NFL draft. We can talk about each option just for a little here. But with a player like Kyren Williams, what I'm seeing that's making him a significantly better option is where he may not necessarily have the size. He actually looks like he is going to be a great pass catcher coming out of Notre Dame. So I'm going to be a little bit more willing to lean on that kind of profile if we're talking about a running back that's most likely going near the end of round 3, the beginning of round 4. Maybe, I don't want to say a Nyheim Hines type player, but he does get 42 receptions through only 12 games his junior season at Notre Dame. And if we're going over and looking at what we have with James Cook, it's another running back that, yes, right now from an NFL standpoint, I mean, most mock drafters are expecting him to go after Brian Robinson. But with James Cook, he doesn't stay in college as long as Robinson. And I understand that Robinson does have his own excuses. And with Cook, you actually see him also in a very competitive backfield. He's coming out of probably the best running back school in history in Georgia. And if you're looking at him, I mean, he actually had to split that backfield with Zamir White. Now, the difference between him and Zamir White is actually with James Cook. He was the running back catching passes where they each had close to, 800 rushing yards. James Cook was a lot more efficient with that, where actually he had 728 rushing yards off of only 113 rush attempts, whereas Zamir White had 856 rushing yards off of 160 rushing attempts. But also with James Cook, this is a running back that had 27 receptions out of the backfield compared to Zamir White. Didn't even get 2 double digits. That's why I'm going to prefer Cook over White as well. I apologize. We can talk about more of those running backs later on another video. But of course, thank you so much for being a part of the flock and supporting the channel. I really hope y'all enjoyed this podcast. I really hope you got something from it, and I hope that you have a great day as well.